Can the Doha Framework end the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo? Kinshasa has handed over 15 prisoners to a powerful rebel alliance. It's part of an agreement signed last year in the Qatari capital. So, what are the hurdles to lasting peace? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Per Nyberg. Stalled for months, the peace process in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo appears to be gaining momentum. The Rwandan-backed M23 rebel group has accepted 15 prisoners released by the government in Kinshasa. Now, this handover is part of a framework agreement signed last year following talks mediated by Qatar. It may be a small step, but it could pave the way to ending the fighting in the eastern DRC. Previous attempts have failed to bring peace to the region. So what are the chances the so-called Doha Framework will succeed? And beyond prisoner release, could this mechanism address the core issues of this long-running conflict? We'll talk to our guests in just a moment. First, this report by Michael Appel.
Kambenga Francois is looking for her son. He was arrested in the Democratic Republic of Congo last year, accused of having links to the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels. He's one of the hundreds, if not thousands, detained in a conflict over territory and resources that dates back decades.
My son has never been a member of the M23. If that was the case, he would not have gone to Kinshasa. I'm hoping he will be released because they have nothing against him.
A large-scale prisoner exchange between Kinshasa and the M23 had been scheduled for April. It never materialized. But then, in the past week, some progress. On August the 6th, the International Committee of the Red Cross confirmed it had been involved in the transfer of 15 detainees from the government to the rebels. It says the convoy carrying the prisoners left the city of Beni in northeastern DRC and traveled into Uganda, crossing back into North Kivu province, where the handover was completed. The Red Cross says it hopes this is the starting point for further similar operations as the parties agree during negotiations. Qatar brokered those talks, which resulted in the DRC and M23 signing the Doha Framework for a comprehensive peace agreement. The US President's envoy was also involved in mediation efforts.
This is not an easy conflict. This is a conflict that has cost the Congo millions of lives and hundreds of thousands of refugees and probably millions of internally displaced. And in addition to all the suffering that we've seen and that we continue to see on a daily basis. So it's historic in many ways.
Late last year, Donald Trump brought together the leaders of the DRC and Rwanda to sign an accord formalizing a permanent ceasefire and the disarmament of non-state armed groups, including the M23.
And I think you're going to see very immediate results. I have confidence that that's what's going to happen. Thank you very much, everybody.
Progress to date has been slow, and mothers like Kambenga will be hoping this prisoner release sparks the momentum that will see their sons return home. Michael Appel, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Let's go ahead and bring in our guests into this conversation. Kambale Musavuli is an analyst at the Center for Research on the Congo-Kinshasa, joining us from Accra. Felix Ndahinda is in Tilburg in the Netherlands. He's a researcher on the Great Lakes region, specializing in conflict resolution, peace and transitional justice. Also, Abdallah El Taibi is joining us from Doha. He's an assistant professor in international affairs at Qatar University. A warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us here on Inside Story. Kambale, we don't know if Kambenga's son was actually among those first 15 people, detainees, released. But do you think that she can be hopeful now that this is just the beginning of more detainees being released and more mothers being able to welcome their sons home?
It's a difficult thing to say now because we do not know the clear strategy from the DRC government. I think the release of the 15 prisoner is a step in the right direction, but it needs to be contextualized. That does not mean that peace is coming to DRC because 15 prisoners have been returned to the M23. We need to look at the Doha agreement in a particular context of the DRC discussing with the rebels to be able to disengage from the area and regain state authority. So outside of prisoners, we also have millions of Congolese who are being held hostage by an occupation by a rebel force. So we have to look at those two things at the same time, and the hope for people on the ground is sooner than later that they can go back to their homes, those who will be displaced, and those who are living under occupation, that they can continue to live a normal life as they had before.
Felix, what do you say? How significant is this first release of 15 detainees? Is this a first glimmer of hope?
Glimmer of hope, I'm not quite sure whether I can tell, but certainly, as the previous speaker said, it's certainly a step in the right direction, in the direction of implementing some, of course, of the steps agreed in Doha. We have to remember that the Doha Agreement is a very complex document which has 8 protocols, 2 which were signed, one dealing indeed with the prisoners' exchanges or releases, if you will, and from both sides, and the other which had to do with the ceasefire and oversight mechanism related thereto. These were the 2 signed, and there were 6 others to be negotiated. That being said, any step made in the direction of implementing either is, of course, always to be welcomed. That being said, looking at the things happening on the ground, the discussions that are happening, the narratives you see from leaders of all parties, it's a good step. At the same time, I'm being cautiously optimistic here, since there seem to be many different things still ahead to be negotiated and to be worked out.
Let me read a statement from Qatar's Foreign Ministry for you. It says the release represents an important step towards strengthening confidence among the parties and creating conducive conditions for further progress. And the statement goes on to say Qatar is committed to continuing its efforts to facilitate dialogue among the parties. Abdallah Taibi, it's been about 9 months since this agreement was signed. Why has it taken so long?
Well, that's a great question, Per. I think it's about confidence building mechanisms. It's a long process to get into peace. And when 2 parties are actually lacking trust in themselves, in each other, then it's very important to, first of all, to lay down the confidence mechanisms. That's very important. We know that it's been almost a year since the signing of the agreement, but there has been different meetings, and the recent one was in April in Switzerland. That was very important to check the ceasefire commitments between both parties, and also because we know it's very hard to negotiate on the names of the prisoners who would be released. And this is not an easy task, basically. Therefore, I think this is why it took time. And now I think we see it on the ground. People will be seeing this from 2 sides that, well, there are prisoners are being released. And this is going to hopefully build more confidence between the conflicting parties, but also will be an incentive to engage even more for more prisoners, and also to keep going with this long process with the 8 protocols, and that aims at prisoners exchange and the ceasefire commitment, and also to go on and on into more of good governance and to build that goodwill between both parties for more peace for the country.
So I was reading through this Doha Framework that was signed by both parties back in November of last year. It talks about 8 articles or 8 protocols. 2 of them were already signed, 6 were going to be negotiated. And I want to mention here Protocol 2 of those that were still to be negotiated, because it talks about an important thing here: restoration of state authority. And if I read it, it says the parties agree that the full restoration of state authority over the entire national territory, the institutions and services constitutes a fundamental pillar of this peace agreement. So basically, both sides seem to agree that the national sovereignty of the DRC must be upheld. So, Kambale, does that mean that the M23 rebels will now have to leave the cities of Goma and Bukavu for there to actually be a peace?
I mean, that is the hope of the people on the ground, even outside of the government discussion. And look, when you were speaking about the Doha agreement, I think Qatar has to move from a diplomacy by declaration, but actually start thinking about diplomacy by verification. And what do I mean by that? When we make these announcements about prisoners being released and things that's being signed, and you just check the facts on the ground, have the conflict ended? No. Has there been a ceasefire? No. Is there escalation of violence? Yes. That the facts on the ground shows that no matter what is being signed, it's not being implemented carefully. So focusing a lot on the verification mechanism to make sure those protocols are actually implemented is critical for peace. But then we had to think about Congo's history. For the past 30 years, we've had multiple militia groups. Actually, I call it's an alphabet soup of rebels. But when we're looking at the M23, they've been engaged under different names in the Congo since 1996, right? We've seen multiple agreements signed. And the question we should ask ourselves, why every time we have agreements, there are certain things that, that is included, such as amnesty to those who committed crimes. And there is recidivism of the same people who committed crimes in the past who are being asked to be released as prisoners today because they're engaging in M23. So if we don't really look at the real root cause of the conflict, we move away from mentioning the rebel groups. We pay close attention to the UN Group of Experts report, showing clearly state supports to militia groups in the Congo, particularly Rwanda, and then address how we make Rwanda a stakeholder for peace in DRC because it's been 30 years.
So, Kambale, what are you looking for from Doha and Qatar in this role of mediators? What do you want from them?
Doha cannot, in my view, this is my very humble view, Doha is an extension of a process that started in Nairobi, of having rebel groups coming together, discussing peace and stability and how to put down the guns. That process was hijacked, in my view, through the international community, where the U.S. is engaging with the states, Rwanda and the DRC, and Doha is engaging directly with the M23 rebel. Doha cannot enforce that. I think that we need to go back to an African solution to the conflict. I think the national dialogue in the DRC, if it's done properly, where all the voices are actually listened to rather than a one-sided process of the Congo, and another process of putting pressure on Congo's neighbors, particularly Rwanda and Uganda, to stop supporting rebel forces in DRC and respect the national sovereignty, which when they do not do that, they break actually the African Union Charter for respect of sovereignty. So an African process will actually help strengthening that, but not from Doha. That's my perspective on the issue.
Abdallah Lataibi, what do you say about that? This African process, all views listened to, and putting pressure on outside actors such as Rwanda?
Well, it's a very complex situation for Congo. There has been different engagements of different parties in the conflict, and this is maybe in one hand we see it as complicating things, but on the other hand we see that there are other partners who are coming to help the Congolese people. We have the Americans working with the state-to-state diplomacy. There is the Qatar engaging more with M23. There is the African Union that is actually supporting the roadmap of Congo. And this is quite important to engage everyone, even Uganda and Rwanda. The prisoners exchange took place through the territory of Uganda. So it's very important to engage everyone, since everyone is indirectly or directly engaged in the conflict. It's very important to keep diplomacy track moving, since there is a prisoners exchange. There is 2 protocols have been signed so far. I think there is progress is happening, but it's very slow. And this is slow because of the history of the conflict, because of how deep the conflict in the country. So it's very important to give a chance now for all parties to engage more and to be having a goodwill. And I think people on the ground, I don't blame them if they lack trust, because they don't see any incentives. But now with more prisoners exchanges, with more verification and identification taking place by third parties such as the Red Cross, I think this is something is promising if it keeps going in the same direction in a very positive way, and to have all parties engaged even more, because this is diplomacy. Diplomacy takes a long time, but it's very fruitful, and very avoiding violence is the key.
Sure, diplomacy takes a long time. At the same time, you have figures stating that at least 6 million people have died in this conflict, have been killed in this conflict since the mid-1990s. Does Doha have any leverage here to implement this peace agreement? Is it incentives? Is it putting any kind of pressure on the parties to actually implement it? What's the leverage here coming from Qatar?
Well, I think Qatar's perspective here is more about access-based mediation, is to have how to transform this access to being a procedural architecture of the whole process, is to keep both parties engaged more, and to have more of have access to exchange messages, to exchange opinions, because these type of diplomatic meetings taking place is very important. We can't actually sideline all other incentives, because at the end of the day, people want to see that on the ground. They believe in diplomacy, they believe in dialogue, but if dialogue doesn't actually bring something tangible on the ground, they will not be patient. And as you said, millions have been killed in this conflict. Therefore, I think it's very important to look at Qatar perspective to it is about proceduralization, where you have steps, and every step comes with a verification, identification, and other mechanisms. But also there are other as well commercial ties with Rwanda as a country, and also the Congo, which is will be kind of an incentives for the governments to keep engaging. And this is quite important for the US, for the African Union, for the people of Congo, Rwanda, and also for the diplomacy of Qatar.
Felix, this peace deal that was brokered by Donald Trump, first signed last summer, and then there was a signing agreement in Washington with Donald Trump there and the two heads of states there in Washington. That deal said that the DRC would help neutralize the FDLR, and Rwanda would help end its support, or would actually end its support for the M23 group. And last month, there was a deal, in fact, between the DRC and the FDLR for the group to disarm. Does that mean, in your view, that we are now on a stronger path towards an actual peace?
Again, as I said in my first statement, any step made in the direction of enforcing any part of the agreement, or the whole agreement as it stands, is a good step in the right direction. Whether we are talking about the Doha Agreement, which concerns the internal dynamics, M23, AFC, and the DRC government, or the Rwanda DRC sources of contention. Indeed, there were steps around in that direction last week. But these are not the first steps. I don't know how many times. I'll be happy to make a historical study on how many times it have been agreed over the last, let's say, 32 years to disarm the FDLR, or whatever the names they carried before, and under the different the administrations, and what steps were taken later, or not rather taken later, should I say. That has been quite very much disappointing in a sense. So many arguments and statements have always been made, the argument and goodwill. But again, if I look at the narrative on the ground and how much practical steps need to be taken in order to identify who. So, for example, one standing accusation of the Rwandan authorities has been that the FDLR commanders are today very much embedded in Congolese armed forces. How much work will be done to identify them through, let's say, agreed upon mechanisms, and then to disarm them indeed, and go through whatever process needed to be went through. It's to be seen, and many arguments have been made in the past, and what really failed was the practical steps of putting them to practice. And that's really the same as well when it comes to Doha, more dealing with the broader, let's say, issues of internal dynamics. Many arguments have been made again. I like always going back to peacemaker.org and look at how many agreements have been done to deal with more or less similar issues as those addressed in the Doha agreement. In fact, many of those issues are recurrent, issues around governance, issues around identity, citizenship, some things that has not been mentioned, which is a very much a source of contention in Eastern DRC.
But Felix,
example,
let me just jump in here. Felix,
yeah.
What about the responsibility on Kigali at this point? Just because I want to ask you, the UN is accusing the M23 of rapes, violent assaults, and killings of civilians, saying that it's affecting a staggering number of individuals. Is it time now for Kigali to put a stop to its support to the M23 rebel group? Even though Kigali denies this support, is it time for the government to say, you know what, it's time for this to stop?
I mean, whatever argument is made is always made within a broader framework of issues that are being raised from all sides. And I guess it's an easy statement to make to say Rwanda should stop providing whatever support it provides to M23. But at the same time, what about whatever dynamics issues it has been raising? My understanding has always been that all parties raise the issues, including Rwanda, or including issues the DRC government raises vis-a-vis Rwanda, and those have to be always seen from both sides of the equation. And whatever implementation has to be made from looking at both sides of the issues. And to me, I have always been convinced that you will never have a resolution of the conflict in the DRC. And it doesn't matter who is the mediator at the time. Keep in mind the long history of involving many mediators already over the last 2 or 3 years. It's not the mediator that matters, it's how you address the issue that matters. And how you address the issues depends on how you address concerns of the DRC government, and how we address issues of governance, issues of citizenship, but also issues of security. And by the way, we have been mentioning only Rwanda, but in the South Kivu, the conflict which is raging here involves, for example, Burundi, which has thousands of troops in mountains of South Kivu. All of those have to be addressed together, including issues regarding Rwanda, certainly. But disarming foreign armed groups, for example, which is mentioned in the Doha Agreement, will never succeed if you look only at the FDLR as the only armed group, without looking at who is fighting in South Kivu, for example, in the mountains. So it's important really to study the history of all of the above in order to understand what needs to be implemented, the soup of armed groups which have been operating, what are they now, what are they doing now, is very important in looking at.
Sure, and where we are right now is that there are so many people still living in these two cities right there on the border. It's been talked about a really difficult humanitarian situation in these cities. Kambale, I want to ask you, what does a resolution to the conflict look like to you, and not just an implementation of one of these protocols?
I don't want to lose the viewers, and I want to just give a very brief history lesson based on the comment that just came. In 1994, there was a Rwandan genocide. At least 1 million Rwandans crossed the border. Amongst them, there were armed groups, the former military, which turned into the FDLR that we know today. It's been over 30 years, right? They've been operating DRC. We have hundreds of thousands of Rwandans who have to return to the country. Some of them are FDLR combatants. In the discussion around FDLR, we always forget in any peace negotiation to ask the Rwandan government to negotiate with the FDLR. Why am I saying this? It is quite preposterous to ask the Congolese government to negotiate with the M23, who have raped, killed, buried people alive, and ask them to sign agreements, give these rebels amnesty. And for over 30 years, the Rwandan government has not had that pressure on them. So I'm clear that for peace to come to DRC, there need to be an inter-Rwanda dialogue and pressure on Kigali to talk to their citizens and to allow them repatriation into the Rwanda so that they could return into their home and participate in normal life. So if we are ignoring that issue and labeling every Rwandan, particular Hutu who are in DRC as FDLR, we will never solve that issue. And that is the security concern that Rwanda brings up, but it's actually a pretext. Because on one hand, they say that they are trying to stop a security threat, which is the FDLR. On the other, we are finding them in the mines. There are so many reports that's been documented around the pilfering of Congo's resources by rebel groups, taking these minerals through Kigali and Kampala and finding its way there. And viewers can research that. So I know that for peace and stability to come in DRC, Rwanda and Uganda have to be part of the discussion, but honest and frank conversation. We cannot talk about 6 million deaths in DRC of people with many ethnic group and simply put it as an ethnic conflict in DRC. He has an economic lens, he has a regional lens of destabilizing DRC and violating the territorial integrity, and we have corporations who are profiteering from this chaos. So at the center of our research on the Congo, we are clear.
Kambale, let me just jump in there because I want to make sure that Abdallah is also brought into the conversation here at the very end. Abdallah, we have about a minute left. I want to ask you, what's in it for Qatar? Why is Qatar interested in continuing these efforts to facilitate this dialogue between these two parties?
Well, it depends on Qatar's constitutional commitment of pursuing diplomacy, pursuing dialogue, pursuing conflict resolution in the world and also in the region. This is a commitment comes from Qatar constitution, the national identity, and the state identity as well. And the DRC, Rwanda conflict and the M23 is one of the very complicated conflicts. People of Congo, people of Rwanda, people of that part of the world, they deserve peace, prosperity, and definitely end of this conflict. Therefore, Qatar is still engaging, and Qatar's experience as a mediator knows that such a complicated conflict needs time to build confidence, trust, and to also to have judicial commitments and framework. A legal framework is very important because this is a conflict that has been there for almost more than 30 years. So therefore, you need to build all the mechanisms very clearly from the beginning and to give it a time to exchange the opinions and perspectives between both parties in order to find a common ground where you can have a lasting peace. And this will take time, unfortunately, but this is the only way. Diplomacy and dialogue are always the way for a better future for us.
All right. Abdallah Lataibi and Kambale Musavuli and Felix Ndahinda, thank you all three so much for joining us here on Inside Story today. And thank you for watching our show. You can, of course, see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, Per Nyberg, and the whole team here in Doha. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in just a moment. Stay with us.